Plans and strategies in the Avdiivka direction continue to change every day. The Ukrainian army is moving its defensive positions in the directions of the Russian offensive, weakening the impact of the attacks. The Ukrainian army is trying to gain time by expanding its area of action in the region, because the Russians are constantly changing the direction of their offensive operations. For this reason, the Ukrainian army needs to be very careful. The Ukrainian defense forces have done this very well so far. However, it must always be careful. The Ukrainian army, which organizes offensive operations against the regions where Russian blocks are located from time to time, destabilizes the Russian blocks in the region. The Russians, shaken by counterattacks, have difficulty in continuing their offensive operations. Sources close to Russia misreport the developments in the region from time to time. Finally, some Russian sources reported that Russian forces overcame Ukrainian defense blocks in Stepove, but this is not true. In our previous reports, we reported that the Ukrainian army blocked the Russian attacks right in front of the railway and neutralized a large number of Russian soldiers and equipment in the area. The current situation is similar. The Ukrainian army controls the movement area in front of Stepove. As soon as the Russian assault troops cross the tracks, Ukrainian forces destroy the Russian troops. A small number of Russian soldiers who survived the attacks are hiding in the structures in the area. The Ukrainian army continues to completely repel the Russian attacks in this region with the strategies implemented in and around Stepove. The Russians are also having difficulty advancing to the Berdichi region, which is their target. Russians often change the direction of attack in Avdiivka. Previously, after unsuccessful operations in the northern region, they turned to the southern region. After the failure of their last attacks, the Russian forces decided to move towards the southern region again. Russian forces decided to move southwards from the Stepove region and move towards the Kimik railway station. This station is located close to the chemical plant. The control of the Russian army in this region could have been a good opportunity to seize the chemical plant, which was the main goal. The control of the Russian army in this region means cutting the supply routes of Ukrainian forces. This could have been a very unfavorable situation for Ukraine. However, the Russian army could not achieve this, because the chemical plant and its surroundings are under the control of Ukrainian army drones. Russians have difficulty in moving in this region. It is suicide for the Russians to move in the region on foot or with armored vehicles. The Ukrainian army is quite strong along the railways. Ukrainian defense blocks are deployed in this area and do not allow Russian troops to pass through the area. The Russians in and around the station were completely shocked by the Ukrainian fire. The Ukrainian attacks were devastating for the Russians. Ukrainian fighters from the 110th Mechanized Brigade have published combat footage of the aftermath of the attack. Russian troops were forced to attack in the open and many of them did not even reach the pumping station. Drones of the Ukrainian army quickly spotted the Russian troops and started hunting them down together with mortar crews. The Ukrainian army organized devastating attacks and completely destroyed the Russian troops in the area. Although Russian forces have continued their offensive in Avdiivka for a long time, all they have gained is more dead Russian soldiers and obsolete equipment. This situation causes criticism of Russian leader Vladimir Putin. Russian people do not find Putin's decisions right. However, Russian commanders are also criticized. The success of many attacks organized in Avdiivka and the deaths of many Russian soldiers are making the Russian people more and more angry every day. The Russians have lost 700 soldiers in the past day, and since the beginning of the war, 338,820 military personnel lost. The Ukrainian army's air dominance in the region is destroying the Russian supply operations. The Russian army is launching airstrikes in the Avdiivka region, but the Ukrainian army continues to inflict losses on the Russians by controlling the areas close to the defense blocks. Near Avdiivka, a Ukrainian FPV unmanned aerial vehicle destroyed a Russian ground unmanned aerial vehicle, delivering ammunition. Ukrainian forces used an FPV drone to eliminate a Russian ground drone that was delivering ammunition to enemy positions near Avdiivka. According to Strategic Industry Minister Alexander Kamyshin, Ukraine plans to produce tens of thousands of drones per month by the end of the year. While the Ukrainian army continues to be effective with drones operations, tens of thousands of drones to be produced with. It will make the Ukrainian army stronger on the front line. One of the biggest reasons for the success of the Ukrainian army in Avdiivka and other fronts is that the entire Ukrainian army acts together and is supported by state officials. Zelensky often visits the front line and visits Ukrainian soldiers. He often holds meetings with Ukrainian commanders, listens to their problems and finds solutions to these problems. Finally, President Volodymyr Zelensky held another meeting with the General Staff of the General Staff to discuss the current situation on the front line. I organized a meeting of the Commander-in-Chief's staff. As always, the Commander-in-Chief and each sector commander reported on the operational situation. Kupiansk, Liman and all Donetsk directions to the south, he said. Zelensky thanked all servicemen and commanders for their endurance and courage. The task of our state, no matter how difficult the situation is, also in the winter months, to show strength and not allow the enemy to seize control, to strengthen. I thank everyone who made this possible for Ukraine. I would especially like to pay tribute to the soldiers who showed themselves the most today, in battles in winter and in this autumn, he stressed. Recently, President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky chaired a meeting of the Supreme Commander-in-Chief's staff, where one of the main topics of discussion was mobilization. Following this, the head of state announced that he had instructed Defense Minister Rustam Umerov and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine Valery Zaluzny to develop a comprehensive mobilization plan in Ukraine. In this situation, the greatest weakness of the Russian forces is logistics. By choosing this vector of attack, Russian commanders forced their troops to use the riskiest and most unprotected roads. The roads have already become notorious among Russian soldiers because they are under Ukrainian ATGM fire control from the chemical plant and also from drones. Even if Russian troops are traveling on foot, which is how they mostly travel in this region, it is almost impossible for them to gather forces in front of Ukrainian positions for an easier and faster attack. Therefore, they cannot copy the tactics they used along the railways. On the other hand, the Ukrainians have densely populated area and a small forest, and they are also 100 meters away from their main base. The Ukrainian army continues its offensive and defensive operations in Kherson and other regions, especially since the Ukrainian army sees Kherson as the key to the Crimea region. It continues its operations in the region carefully and effectively. However, since the Avdiivka region is also strategically very important, it keeps the defense blocks in this region very ready and strong. The Ukrainian army was redeployed Ukrainian troops to the area to destroy all remaining Russian elements in and around the station area, where the clashes took place. The troops deployed from Stepove to clear this area started the operation. After reconnaissance operations in the area, the Ukrainian army opened fire on the areas where Russian troops were concentrated, and on Russian positions. Some Russian soldiers tried to escape from Ukraine's intense attacks, but failed to do so. The Russians were destroyed before they could advance in the area, and another Russian offensive failed. What do you think is the main reason for the failure of the Russian offensive in the Avdiivka area? Along with the unsuccessful offensives, the Russians are losing a large number of soldiers and equipment. Avdiivka has become a death zone for the Russians. Now, the more Russians organize offensive operations in Avdiivka, the more soldiers they lose. Do you think the Ukrainian army will be able to completely repel the Russians from Avdiivka?